All right, so we've got all of our close mics for the drums processed and sounding good. Now it's time to start adding in the rooms and then also bringing in the drum bus processing. So let's start with the rooms. We've got 2 room tracks with this drum kit, stereo pair here, and then a mono room. So the mono room is really where the cool part comes in, but let's start with the stereo rooms here. So not a bad room track, but obviously pretty muddy in the kick. So that's the first thing we're doing is cleaning up some of the low end, doing a nice cut here around 144, and then also filtering out some high end. I like the room tracks to sound dark and kind of further away, and that's why we do the high end low pass filter on the EQ here, usually on most room tracks that I get. So hear how it's kind of warming up the cymbals and then also getting rid of this muddiness here. Kind of a harsh high end, so it helps the close mics, the top end that we've been working on with the nice crack and punch at the top end of our close mics, kick, snare, toms, by filtering that out a little bit of the room tracks. That helps the close mics take care of that punch and impact and cut through the mix, and then the room mics just fill everything in around it. So that's really my goal with the room tracks is, all the kind of tightness that we've engineered through the close mics, especially in the cymbals. We're cutting out all the body of the kit sound, right? Well, here's where we're going to start filling it in with the room tracks. So that was the EQ, just some cuts, getting rid of some nastiness, no boost there yet. And then we'd use the room setting on the 1176. So 4:1 ratio. So I'm not absolutely destroying this, but relatively slow attack and fast release for this compressor. This is just bringing up some of the room sound. So hear how it's emphasizing kind of the decay of the kick and snare. They sound kind of dry, kind of boring. This just brings up the character of the room. Makes it sound a little bigger, brings up the ambience. Really nice. So then we got some EQ here. So we're boosting a mid-range shelf at 1.5K. So kind of an unusual move here, but I just man, I just want more. I want more high end, but not so much the sizzly stuff. I'm already filtering that out. I just want more presence from this drum room, but I want it kind of everywhere. So I'm boosting it from 1.5K up a couple of dB. And then we're also boosting at 1K here, just again to emphasize that kind of the character of the mid-range of the room. And why I'm doing this will probably be a little more obvious if I actually play the rest of the kit. So I've got this drum track, or this room track turned up more than it is in the mix, but just so you can hear it. So hear how you don't really notice the character of the room without this mid-range boost on the EQ. Just helps it be a little more obvious in the mix. So I'll put it back down here to where it actually was in the mix. So this stereo room track, it's not adding a ton. Just a little bit of glue to the kit. Making it sound not quite so sterile and not quite so dry. Helping to glue it all together. So that's the stereo room. Now, listen to what the mono room adds, though. So this is cool. So any drum kit I'm mixing, I'm trying to find something unique, some cool part of it, whether it's a room mic or just the raw close mics, something unique that I can emphasize. And in this track, it was this mono room mic. So if I bypass all the plugins, it might not seem like much. So here's what the raw track sounds like. So right away, I'm like, oh man, that character of the snare here is really cool. I want to work with that. I don't really want so much the kick and the cymbals and everything, but I really want that snare. So I'll show you what I did here is I created a send from my snare top track here. So here's my snare top track. This is a send going out bus 133. It doesn't matter what it is. I just chose an open bus, set it to pre-fader so that the level of this send is going to be independent of whatever's happening on the fader here. So I'm sending a consistent level over here through bus 133. Now on the gate, I set up a gate here. So I'm kind of using it the opposite way you would think, but I'm using a gate on this mono room track, and I want the gate to open whenever it sees the input from this snare top track. So sending out bus 133, notice I have a key input. This is called the key input, bus 133. So, and then on the side chain here, I've selected this key icon. So that means it's not going to listen to the actual mono room track. It's going to control the gate based on what it's getting from this key input. All right, so this snare top track is determining how the gate behaves and when it opens and shuts. So that's super important because basically what I'm trying to do is turn down the room track when there's no snare being hit and turn it up when the snare hits. So I'm basically making all the snare hits in this mono room track louder than anything else. So let's check it out. So here how I've turned down the track except for when the snare is hit. So right now, like with the gate bypassed, kick and snare, same level pretty much. Now the snare's louder. So I'm not going all the way here. It's only attenuating by 6 dB. You can't go too extreme with this. It still needs to sound natural. But that's a really cool trick for, I find this all the time is I want more like, oh man, I want more of that snare room sound, but I don't want everything else in the room track. This is a way that you can get it. So that's first in the chain. And then we're using a more aggressive compression setting with the CLA 76. This is the all buttons in preset here. Hear how it's emphasizing that snare even more because the compressor is acting on the snare, which is now the loudest part of this track. It's giving it a little bit of a smack, but it's also bringing up the ambience, which is, the all buttons in mode on these 1176s. That's what they do. It just makes it more aggressive and just brings out all the character of it. Now listen to what it would have been without this gate first. Tons of kick and cymbal, right? But with this clever little key input of the gate, it becomes mostly snare. And then I try to pull out the snare even more with my EQ moves here. So really emphasizing the upper mid-range here is around 1K. That's really going to cut through the mix. Also actually emphasize around 600 hertz, which is a little bit unusual. But again, I'm trying to bring out the body and the tone of the snare in this room. And you notice how I did not boost around 600 anywhere else in the drums. Actually, I cut it. So that's a nice little hole that I've got in my drum sound to kind of basically insert this mono room track and the snare sound from it. So a lot of boosting around the 1K area and then a little bit further up here around 4K with a shelf. Also kind of filtering out some of the low end and extreme high end as well. So again, listen in the context of the kit, what this EQ move does. So right now you can hear it, it's there, but it's kind of pushed back. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, we've got a really cool room character happening here. So I really love how that turned out. If I bring back the balance, this is where I ended up with in the mix, and it's pretty significant. It's having a pretty significant role here. Listen to the snare. And even the toms too. If you listen on the snare and the toms on this fill here, little AB. And to me, that just makes all the difference. It's like you go from kind of a standard, kind of dry, tight, metal drum kit with samples. Sounds good, but it's almost just a little bit too normal. It's kind of stock, it's kind of boring, but then you add in this mono room mic and it's like, oh wow, Now it has some character. Now it sounds like a real live drum kit in a real room that sounds unique.